Hi, I'm Jay.
And I'm Lisa.
And in this video, you're going to hear and see references to the JLT oil separator. Well, we're excited to announce that as of December 2021, all JLT oil separators will now be J&L oil separators.
Same great product with a different name.
Thank you for your purchase.
We're going to go over the installation of the JLT oil separator for your 2-liter Ford Edge. Included in the JLT kit is the JLT oil separator, the mounting bracket, the mounting screws, and 2 3/8 hoses. The tools you're going to need for the installation: it's a standard screwdriver, a Phillips head screwdriver, a 1/4 inch 7mm socket, 10mm socket, 13mm socket, an extension, a 1/4 inch ratchet, a 10mm 3/8 socket, extension, and a torque wrench. We recommend also a flashlight, hose cutters or a razor blade to cut hose. A lighter is optional but recommended. Oil for lubrication of hoses, grease for lubrication of hoses, and tape for marking a hose later in an installation. This job can be involved. I would watch this video start to finish and assess your mechanical ability accordingly. Let's get started. Okay, our first step, I'm going to remove the engine cover by pulling up. Set that off to the side. Next, you'll see some breather lines here we'll need to disconnect. A wiring harness. Let's go and remove those. This yellow one, you will squeeze. Yellow releases by pulling back on the security tab and pressing inward to release the fitting. The smaller line has these white buttons. There's one on each side. You're going to squeeze both of those to remove. Just pull that back. Next, the plug for this map sensor. It's got a white tab. You have to slide the tab towards the rear of the plug to unlock it. We slid this white tab back and then we squeezed it to release and pull the plug off. So just set that off to the side. Okay, now we're going to need to remove this insulator. This is just going to pull over these tabs, and this could be in varying conditions depending on how many times it's been removed. But there is one fastener securing it. And we're going to pry that out with a screwdriver here. And once it starts to get loose, just grab it with your fingers. Which is this here. So I just put the screwdriver behind one of these tabs and just gently pried it out. It slowly came out and unlocked. So now this should give us the ability to remove this. That's up and out of the way, and that's going to give us access to our bolts. Okay. We're also going to need to remove this hose here. You're going to have a connection here that's red. I've also seen it yellow. You may even have it green. This connection disconnects almost like an ice line on a refrigerator. You have to separate the black from the red. You can actually do it sometimes with just your fingernail or a small thin flathead screwdriver. So you're just going to push the red connection away from the black, like so, and that will remove. So now our bolts, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They are all 10mm. I suggest using a deep well socket, extension, and 1/4 inch ratchet. And we're going to start breaking these free. Okay, right now I have 4 out of the 5 bolts out of the manifold, but I'm going to go ahead and loosen up the clamp to the throttle body before loosening the manifold, just so it stays secure. There is a clamp here. You can use a flathead screwdriver or a 7mm socket to get down there and loosen that up. So I'm going to use a socket, a short extension. And that will allow us to pull the manifold off of the throttle body coupler. Okay, we just removed our last bolt, so just wiggle the manifold and it will start to pull right off. Now there's going to be a couple extra hoses and plugs we're going to have to get before we can get this completely out. So starting on this passenger side, there is another hose that is the 2-button release. And pull that away. Next, there is this gray and black plug, which we can just pull off here from its retainment tab and keep it plugged in. And then the PCV line, it's a line that feels like an S behind the manifold. And I'm going to show you how that removes once I get it off. It's got 2 tabs and you squeeze them. There we go. So we should be pretty close to getting this all the way out. Look at that PCV line and how that connection disconnects. You notice it has these 2 tabs. They got ribs on them so you can feel them. What you do is you squeeze them and it pushes the retainment clips out and then pull off the connection. Sometimes you can get them to pop and just kind of wiggle, and then you can reach your hand in there and pull it off the rest of the way. Here on this driver's side, just like that gray and black plug, we have another plug over here that we can remove from the tabs, and I'll show you that closer up. Loosen up this clamp a little bit more. Now the manifold is loose. I gotta imagine we're gonna have a plug on the throttle body. Okay, so to show you everything that we just disconnected, the gray and the black plugs were on these 2 tabs. They just slid right off. That was our other breather line connection. There was a plug to the throttle body, which was this security plug. You have to push the red tab rearward to allow it to press to release. And then the PCV line. All right, we're going to locate our PCV line, which is this line here, shaped like a question mark. We're going to need to remove this line from the PCV valve. Sometimes you can pull this line right off, it'll pop, it'll take some significant effort. However, if you pull too hard, you have a chance of breaking the PCV valve, which is not a very simple replacement. You have to replace this whole plate. So what I suggest you do is grab a lighter or a heating element, a heat gun. I typically just use a lighter because I can control where the heat's going. And you're just going to heat this hose up just a little bit to make it a little soft, and it will pull right off. So I'm going to go from underneath, and I'm just going to heat it up a little bit. And it pulled right off. So I just heated it up from this side. You could even rotate it because it will spin. And that pulls our line right off. Next, we're going to need to remove this. So same thing, sometimes you can pull this right out, like so. And if it's giving you a lot of trouble, use the same method. Just heat up this hose ever so slightly. Just be careful with your hands because the hose is going to be hot. And now we're ready to install this into our JLT hoses. All right, we're going to need to put our intake manifold fitting into our JLT hose. Use your oil dropper or Q-tip with some oil to lube up the hose so it's easy to press this fitting into it. Get that hose all the way flush with the base of the fitting. Next, we're going to have to get our other line onto our PCV. This rotates. I'm going to point it straight out so I can get the best leverage to it. Your best friend here is going to be lubrication. Typically, you can get away with using motor oil, dish soap. About the best stuff that we found to use is grease, like wheel bearing grease, axle grease. So I put some grease. You can use a Q-tip, works real well. And I'm just going to grease the end of this hose. And this is going to allow me to press this hose onto that fitting. You can also put a little on your fitting. You can't really overdo it. So and then to install this line, you're going to go underneath this wiring harness and this coolant line. You're going to push it onto the fitting and get it to the base. Again, trying to use just enough force that you need because you don't want to press it so hard that you break it. It is plastic. Once we have that there, we're going to take the other end of our line, come up through the harness, and the PCV will rotate to get us pointed where we want to go. Now what I'm going to do with that line is I'm going to label it. I'm just going to put a piece of tape on it, and that's going to let me know after I have my manifold back on and I got two lines running out of there that I don't confuse which line is which. It's very important that that PCV line runs to the filtered side of the can. So let's go ahead and do that. So again, this, I'm just going to put a piece of tape on it. And I know that is to my PCV valve. Okay, now we're going to work on reinstalling our manifold. So the first connection we're going to make, basically we're going to do it in reverse of how we took it off. We're going to reconnect the throttle body plug. We're going to start to reconnect our charge pipe. Then our two gray and black plugs, our breather line, and then we're going to want to connect the JLT line before we fasten it. It'll be much easier to do it once the manifold is loose. Grabbing our manifold, throttle body plugs at the bottom. Go ahead and take our harness, plug that in, you hear it snap, push in the red security tab, give a good little tug to the plug to make sure it's fastened. Now we're going to work on the coupler. And I basically just want to get it started because it'll be easier to push the rest of the way up once the manifold is secure. But actually it's about all the way up now, so that's good. Now our gray plugs, we want to clip those back onto their retainments. They will just slide right over their tabs like that. And then we have our one breather line here. Just push that on. And then let's grab our JLT line. So this is going to snap over that intake manifold fitting, that larger fitting. And now we should be ready to sit the manifold. It's got these dowels that will help you align it. And then you can just get a bolt started to hold it. Start them all by hand. Do not start with power tools. In fact, I don't recommend using power tools at all during this job. So what you want to do is you want to put all your bolts in and just snug them up. Don't tighten them. Just get them all started. And again, the only tricky one is this one over here by the pulley. Push your hoses out of the way. Feed the bolt in with your fingers. And you may have to start the first couple threads just using your fingers to make sure it engages. Once you have them all started, we're going to work on torquing them down. The specs for these bolts is 14 foot-pounds. Again, that's foot-pounds, not inch-pounds. If you don't have a torque wrench, you could still do this job, all depending on your mechanical ability of understanding how tight 14 foot-pounds is. We're going to do this with a torque wrench. It's set to 14. You're going to start with the center bolt and work your way out. All right, once you have your bolts torqued down, again, going reverse of order, we're going to do our installation. This has got this tab and a hole that it's going to stick out of, so make sure you line that. And it'll sit into place. We're going to put our pin back in that hole. And that just pushes right on. Then our map sensor plug. Remember, this one has a security tab. So we'll get that to snap on. And then engage the plug. All right. And then our push hose over here. This is going into that red connection. That snaps in. Now I tied these hoses up to keep these out of the way because they wanted to keep flopping down. So you could have done that with a zip tie. I did it with a piece of wire. We're going to plug these back in. Remember, the yellow one's got a security tab, so press that in. The white snaps over. We want to check on our coupler at the throttle body. We want to make sure it's pushed all the way up to the base of the throttle body. and then we're going to retighten that clamp. Again, that was 7mm socket, which is significantly easier to grab a hold of down there than using a flathead screwdriver, but use what you have. And I am pretty close. I got about 1/4 of an inch to push it up, but I'm going to start my clamp. There we go. So what I did is my clamp was very loose, so I just snugged it up ever so slightly and then pushed the coupler the rest of the way up to the throttle body, and it fell right into place. So now I'm going to tighten the clamp up. Not sure if you can see that or not, but it's all the way to the base of the throttle body. So our bracket is going to mount to this isolator. I'm going to remove this 13mm bolt to break that free. Once you have that bolt out, grab your JLT bracket, put the bolt through the bracket, and reinstall. Now I did leave this bracket loose for now so we can adjust where we want the can to sit. But go and grab your JLT can and the mounting screws and get those started. And you can go and tighten up those screws with your Phillips head screwdriver. Now what we want to pay close attention to is the routing of these hoses. So remember, the line with the tape on it is to the PCV valve, which is going to run to my T side. That's where the filter is. Okay, so we have our 2 lines. The catch cans are loose. What we're going to want to do is just lightly sit the engine cover back in its location. You'll feel when it's in its grommets, so don't press it all the way down yet. And this is going to allow us to trim these hoses to fit. So this one, remember, you wanted to go to the base of the fitting. So I'm just going to grab it. There's writing on the hose too. You can sometimes use as a guide. I can see this is between these fittings. I'm just going to lift this cover back up to get that back out. And I need to cut this line. You can cut it with a pair of hose cutters, razor cutters. You can cut it with a razor blade. You can cut it with a pair of dikes. But let's cut our line there. Set the cover back down and see how that lines up. I might need to cut a little bit more off. Take a peek, see if we're on anything. Yeah, I'm going to cut off about another inch. So now I'm going to go ahead and lubricate this hose, a little bit of oil, and push it onto my fitting, like so. See, because our goal here is we want to keep this hose away from this pulley. So me pushing this can up is going to pivot it, the hose, which is good. So let's set the engine cover back down and let's do the intake manifold line. That's going to be ideal to come through this opening here in the front of the cover. Like so. So this looks like it needs to be cut right at this C. Measure it up. Let's see what that looks like. I'm gonna lubricate that hose. Push that on. Okay. So we want to keep the can off the reservoir. So, tighten our bracket up. And then I'm going to pop this engine cover back off to see what everything looks like. So as you can see, we got plenty of clearance here from the pulley on the intake manifold line. We got plenty of clearance here from the pulley on the PCV line. We can remove our tape. So now all that is left is to reinstall our engine cover the remainder of the way. It sits in all its grommet.